What does victory look like? Is it the cold, sterile satisfaction of a courtroom gavel? Or is it the blinding flash of diamonds under a ballroom chandelier? For one woman, it was both. At 3:15 p.m. she walked out of the Manhattan Superior Court, her marriage over her bank account gutted, and her ex-husband smirking in triumph. The world wrote her off. But at 7:45 p.m., just 4 hours later, she emerged from a jet-black Rolls-Royce at the Met Gala draped in haute couture. This isn't just a divorce story. This is the story of how Isabel Sterling lost everything to win it all. The air in courtroom 3B was stale, smelling of old wood varnish, cheap coffee, and desperation. For 18 months, this room had been Isabel Sterling's personal purgatory, and today it was ending. And, upon review of the prenuptial agreement dated October 12, 2014, this court finds the contract to be valid, binding, and ironclad. Judge Mariana Vasquez didn't even look up from her papers. To her, this was just another high society divorce, another Tuesday. The petition for dissolution is granted. All assets listed within Appendix A of the agreement are to remain the sole property of Mr. Arthur Cromwell. A one-time non-alimony payment of $250,000 as stipulated will be transferred to Ms. Sterling née Gautier upon signing. This matter is concluded. Gavel, bang. A ripple of quiet, satisfied harumphs came from the opposing table. Arthur Cromwell, titan of finance, founder of Cromwell Global Holdings, sat like a Roman emperor. His suit was a custom Brioni. His silver hair was perfect, and his face held a look of profound, bored victory. He hadn't just won, he had annihilated. Beside him, his legal team from Harrigan, Shaw, and Lynch discreetly packed their alligator skin briefcases. Mr. Harrigan, the lead shark, allowed himself a thin reptilian smile. He glanced at Isabel's counsel, a young, earnest, and thoroughly outgunned David Chen, who was staring at his legal pad as if it held the answers to the universe. Isabel felt the weight of a dozen Armani-clad gazes on her back. Arthur's friends, his board members, were here to witness the final execution. "Stand, Ms. Sterling," David Chen whispered, his voice hoarse. Isabel stood. She was wearing a simple navy blue sheath dress from Theory. It was 2 seasons old. It was the only respectable thing Arthur hadn't put in storage. She hadn't spoken a word the entire hearing. She hadn't needed to. The prenup, signed under duress just days before her wedding as her father's company teetered on the brink of a Cromwell-engineered bankruptcy, had done all the talking. She was left with her name, her clothes, and $250,000 that in their world was a tip. She was officially, spectacularly, and publicly ruined. Arthur stood as well. He straightened his waistcoat and, with the practiced magnanimity of a victor, walked over to her. The press in the gallery, kept in the back row like penned animals, leaned in their long-lens cameras, desperate for the shot. "Isabel," he said, his voice a low, condescending rumble. "No hard feelings, I hope. Business is business." He glanced at her lawyer. "And you, Mr. Chen, a valiant effort. Perhaps next time stick to traffic court." David Chen's jaw tightened, but Isabel placed a light hand on his arm. She turned to Arthur. The man who had courted her, married her, and then systematically isolated her. The man who called her his little bird, and then clipped her wings, her friendships, and her family ties. The man who, she discovered, had been funneling money to his new paramour, Chloe Preston, for 2 years, using a shell company he thought she was too stupid to notice. She looked at his perfectly handsome, utterly cruel face. And then she did the one thing no one in the room expected. Isabel Sterling smiled. It was not a small, polite, defeated smile. It was a slow-burn, high-wattage, enigmatic grin that started at the corners of her mouth and lit up her entire face. It was the smile of a woman who knew a secret, a delicious, explosive secret. Arthur's own smile faltered. He took an involuntary step back. "What? What's so funny?" "Oh, Arthur," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the quiet room. "You have no idea." She turned, not waiting for a reply. With David Chen at her side, she walked down the central aisle. The camera shutters began to click, a frantic mechanical heartbeat. Click, 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 click. As she reached the heavy oak doors, she passed the public gallery. In the back row, a young platinum blonde woman, Chloe Preston, was sitting wearing sunglasses indoors. She was trying to be inconspicuous, but the 8-carat diamond on her left hand, a pre-engagement gift the New York Post had called it, was practically incandescent. Chloe was waiting to comfort the victor. Isabel's gaze locked with Chloe's for a fraction of a second. Isabel's smile widened. She even gave a tiny conspiratorial wink. Chloe Preston visibly recoiled. Then Isabel pushed open the doors and stepped into the hallway, a blinding wall of flashes erupting. Paparazzi and news crews who had been tipped off by Arthur's own PR team expecting a weeping wife spectacle surged forward. "Isabel, are you really leaving with nothing?" "Mrs. Cromwell, how does it feel? Arthur got everything. What will you do now?" She didn't run. She didn't hide her face. She walked through the storm of questions as if she were walking on water. The smile never left her face. She reached the top of the courthouse steps, the gray Manhattan sky looming above. Arthur and his team, watching from the courtroom window, were frozen. "What is she doing?" Harrigan muttered, unsettled. "She's supposed to be crying." "It's hysterics," Arthur said, though a cold knot of dread was tightening in his stomach. "She's finally snapped. She'll be irrelevant by morning." On the steps, Isabel paused. She looked directly into the lens of a New York Times photographer. The smile was gone, replaced by a look of serene, unshakable confidence. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The picture would be on the front page of the style section tomorrow, but the world had the story all wrong. They thought they were watching a tragedy. Isabel Sterling knew they were watching the prologue to a triumph. "Phase 1 complete," David Chen murmured, shielding her as he opened the door to a waiting, generic-looking black sedan. Not a taxi, but certainly not a limo. "Flawlessly, David," Isabel replied, sliding in. The smile returned sharp as a diamond. He signed. He confirmed under oath that all assets were declared. He just put the noose around his own neck. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the media circus to devour Arthur Cromwell, who finally emerged looking for the first time in his life utterly confused. To understand the smile, you must understand the cage. Isabelle Gautier had not been a gold digger. She had been collateral. Her father, Pierre Gautier, had owned a small, brilliant logistics software company. Arthur Cromwell, in his quest to monopolize the entire supply chain, didn't want to buy it. He wanted to crush it. He launched a hostile takeover, bleeding Pierre's company dry. Then he met Isabel at a charity benefit. She was 24, bright, with a degree in art history but a mind for systems and logic. He was charmed, and then he was obsessed. He made Pierre an offer. "I'll call off my dogs. I'll absorb your debt. I'll even give you a seat on a subsidiary board. All you have to do is introduce me to your daughter properly." Pierre, a broken man, had agreed. The marriage was a whirlwind, and then it was a prison. Arthur loved to show her off. "This is my wife Isabel," he would say at dinners at Percé or Le Bernardin. "She's beautiful, isn't she? Speaks 3 languages. But thank God she has me. She can't even balance a checkbook." The guests would chuckle. Isabel would smile. He slowly, methodically cut her off. Her old friends bored him. Her family was low rent. He gave her an allowance monitored by his financial office. He gifted her with a position as head of his charitable foundation, a position with no power, no budget, and a single task to look good in photos. For the first 2 years she was numb. She was the perfect porcelain trophy. She attended galas, hosted dinners, and died a little inside every day. The change came on a Tuesday. Arthur was in Shanghai. She was in his home office at their 60-acre Greenwich compound looking for a piece of letterhead for the foundation. His main computer was on. He never let her touch it. But his password, Icarus 77, the arrogance was one she'd known for years. She was just looking for the stationery folder. But she saw a different one labeled Projects. And inside that, a file named Chimera. She clicked. It wasn't a corporate file. It was a encrypted off-ledger black budget project, a new AI-driven logistics platform. It was brilliant, it was revolutionary, and it was deeply, deeply illegal. She saw the projections, billions, she saw the schematic, and she saw the foundation of the entire code. Her blood went cold. She recognized it. It was the core algorithm from her father's old company, the one Arthur had supposedly shelved after the acquisition. Arthur had taken her father's masterpiece, polished it with his own dark money, and was preparing to launch it as his own. He hadn't just stolen her father's company, he had stolen his legacy. That night, Isabel Sterling stopped being a prisoner. She became a spy. For a year, she played the part of the perfect, vapid wife. By day, she tasted canapés for parties. By night, she sat in the dark of her walk-in closet with a burner laptop and a military-grade encrypted hard drive. She learned to code. She learned to trace offshore accounts. She followed the digital breadcrumbs from Cromwell Global to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, Phaethon Investments. And she found the leverage. The patent for her father's algorithm Prometheus was set to expire. But it was her father's. Upon his death, a heart condition just 6 months after the wedding, his personal assets had passed to her. The patent was hers. Arthur had just assumed it was part of the corporate acquisition. He'd never bothered to check. His lawyers had made a multi-billion-dollar clerical error. She could sue, but that would be messy public and take years. Arthur's lawyers would bury her in appeals. No, she wouldn't sue. She would seize. She needed a lawyer, not a Harrigan, Shaw, and Lynch shark. She needed someone invisible, someone brilliant, and someone hungry. She found David Chen through a pro bono tech law journal. He was a digital forensics genius who'd just been fired from a big-name firm for telling a partner he was ethically compromised. She met him at a Starbucks in Queens wearing a hoodie and sunglasses. She laid out the data. David's eyes went wide. "Ms. Cromwell, this is the keys to the kingdom." "He's divorcing me," she said, her voice flat. "He's met someone else. He's going to activate the prenup. He thinks he's leaving me with nothing." "He is," David said, looking at the screen. "He's leaving you with everything. He just doesn't know it's yours." The plan was hatched. It was simple. And it was brutal. Step 1. Let Arthur file for divorce. Step 2. Fight him on nothing. Make him believe she was weak, defeated, and broken. Step 3. Let him win. Let him go to court and under oath finalize the dissolution. Let the judge's gavel fall. Step 4. The moment the divorce was finalized, she would be Isabel Sterling again, and her premarital assets, including the Prometheus patent, were hers and hers alone. Arthur would have no spousal claim. Step 5. While Arthur was toasting his victory, Isabel and David would execute the real plan. They needed a partner, a whale. Someone with the cash, the infrastructure, and a deep-seated hatred for Arthur Cromwell. There was only one name on the list: Sebastian Vail, the 35-year-old new tech billionaire. A Silicon Valley enigma who had moved his Vail Digital Ventures to New York specifically, he'd said, to break up the old boys club. He and Arthur hated each other. Their rivalry was the stuff of Wall Street Journal legends. David Chen had secured a meeting. Isabel, dressed in her sad wife clothes, had presented her case. Sebastian Vail hadn't said a word for 10 minutes. He just looked from the data to Isabel and back again. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "You're not a bird, Ms. Sterling. You're a dragon. You don't just want to escape. You want to burn his castle to the ground and build your own on the ashes." "I want what's mine," Isabel said. "You'll get it," Vail said. "And I'll get Project Chimera. And Arthur will get the SEC. I like it. My gala is on Tuesday, the night of your divorce hearing. It's fitting." "I won't be able to get in," Isabel had said. "I won't have the money, the dress." Sebastian Vail had smiled. "Oh, Isabel, you won't need a ticket. You're the guest of honor." The black sedan didn't go uptown to the grand empty penthouse she had once called home. The lock, she knew, had been changed by 3:16 p.m. It didn't go to a hotel. It went to a private, unmarked elevator entrance for the Setai residences on Wall Street, an address so discreet that even the paparazzi didn't know to watch it. David Chen swiped a black keycard. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling 5,000-square-foot penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a staggering view of the Statue of Liberty. "Mr. Vale's personal residence," David said, checking his watch. "You have exactly 3 hours and 30 minutes. The apartment was not empty. It was a high-fashion, high-tech command center. In the living room, a team of 4 people stood waiting. A man with sharp glasses and a tape measure, a tailor, a woman with a cloud of pink hair, and a makeup case the size of a car battery, and 2 others who were unpacking garment bags with religious reverence. "Ms. Sterling," said the man who introduced himself as Antoine. "Mr. Vale sends his apologies. He is at the venue. He insisted you wear this. It just cleared customs." He unzipped the largest bag. Isabel gasped. It wasn't a dress. It was a work of art. A Schiaparelli custom haute couture. Black velvet so deep it seemed to drink the light with a built-in rib cage of anatomical gold embroidery encrusted with rubies. It was shocking. It was aggressive. It was, in a word, armor. "And these, said the woman with the pink hair. She opened a Graff jewelry case. Lying on a bed of blue velvet was a necklace. A cascade of flawless ice-white diamonds centered by a single breathtaking canary-yellow diamond the size of a robin's egg. "It's too much," Isabel whispered, her hand going to her throat. "It's exactly enough," Antoine said. "The theme of the gala is the new gods. You are to be Persephone back from the underworld. Now vite." For the next 3 hours, Isabel Sterling was deconstructed and rebuilt. She was scrubbed, buffed, and massaged. Her respectable wife, shoulder-length hair was swept up into a severe, elegant chignon that exposed the neckline of the dress. Her makeup was dramatic, a smoky eye, pale, perfect skin, and a deep, blood-red lip. As they worked, David Chen was in the corner on his laptop, his own transformation happening. "The decree is filed," he said, not looking up from his screen. "You are officially Isabel Sterling. Your new bank accounts are active, funded by the initial wire from Vale." "And the Phaethon shell?" Isabel asked as the makeup artist applied a final dangerous-looking coat of mascara. "Vale's digital team just initiated the hostile transfer. We've taken control of the Cayman servers. Arthur's access codes are void." "And the patent?" "I filed the injunction against Cromwell Global for infringement at 3:17 p.m., right after the gavel. They've just been served. Harrigan is probably having a coronary as we speak." "Good," Isabel said. The dress was zipped. It fit like a second skin. The necklace was clasped. It was cold and unbelievably heavy, the weight of her new power. She stood before the mirror. The woman who had left the courthouse, a pale, forgettable woman in a navy dress, was gone. The woman in the mirror was terrifying. She was a queen. "One last thing," Antoine said. He produced a small velvet box. Inside wasn't jewelry. It was a single black metal card, an Amex Centurion card. "Your new one," David said, smiling for the first time all day. "The name on the account is Sterling Industries." At 7:40 p.m., the elevator doors opened to the garage. A gleaming jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom was waiting. "He'll be there, you know," David said, holding the door. "With her." "I know," Isabel said. "That's half the fun." The car glided into the Manhattan traffic, a silent black shark moving through the glittering water. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was lit up like a beacon, a modern-day Olympus rising from the dark of Central Park. The street was a logjam of limousines, flashing police lights, and the roar of a thousand-throated crowd pressed against barricades. This was not just any gala. This was Sebastian Vale's first Met Gala. He had personally donated $50 million to the museum to bring the Costume Institute into the 21st century, and had in turn been given carte blanche. The theme, The New Gods, Tech, Myth, and Power, was a direct shot at the old money of New York, and the old money had come just to show they were still relevant. The Rolls-Royce Phantom carrying Isabel bypassed the entire line, given a police escort directly to the base of the famous steps. "Who is that?" a Vogue correspondent whispered into her microphone. "They're getting the veil treatment. Not even the mayor got that." The door was opened by a discreet security guard. A single black Manolo Blahnik heel stepped out onto the red carpet. The press, who had been lazily photographing a B-list actress, collectively turned. A hush fell, then chaos. Isabel Sterling emerged from the car. The flashbulbs erupted a solid wall of light, a supernova. She was unrecognizable from the woman on the courthouse steps 4 hours prior. The Schiaparelli dress, the Graf diamonds, the sheer unadulterated audacity of her presence, it was a visual concussion. Is that Isabel Cromwell? No, it can't be. My God, the dress, who is she wearing? She's not on the guest list. At the top of the steps, posing for the main bank of cameras, stood Arthur Cromwell. He had recovered from his courtroom confusion. He was back in his element, holding court, his hand possessively on the waist of Chloe Preston. Chloe was wearing a slinky silver Versace gown. She looked beautiful, but in the way a brand-new luxury car looks beautiful, expensive, shiny, and replaceable. Arthur was in mid-sentence with a Wall Street Journal reporter when the roar from the crowd below changed. He turned, annoyed at the interruption. He saw the black Rolls-Royce. He saw the dress. He saw the woman. His blood didn't just run cold. It froze solid. The WSJ reporter, sensing a story, said, "Arthur isn't that." Arthur's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His jaw was slack. He looked for a moment like a man who had seen a ghost. A very well-dressed, very expensive ghost. Chloe, seeing his reaction, turned. Her own spray-tanned, perfectly contoured face crumpled in on itself. The woman she had seen in court was a nothing, a nobody. This was a threat. "Arthur!" Chloe whined, grabbing his arm. "Arthur, who is she with? How did she get here?" But Arthur was speechless. Isabel began her ascent. She didn't rush. She walked up the steps one by one as if she owned them. She didn't look at the press. She didn't look at the crowd. And she absolutely did not look at Arthur and Chloe. She looked straight ahead. The press was screaming. "Isabel, Isabel, who are you wearing? Are you with a date? Ms. Sterling, how did you get an invite?" She reached the landing where Arthur and Chloe stood paralyzed. The air crackled with tension. The three of them were in a triangle of diamonds, silks, and pure hatred. Isabel paused just for a moment. She looked at Arthur. Her face was serene. She gave him the exact same smile she had given him in the courtroom. Then she turned to the lead Vogue correspondent, who looked faint with excitement. "Who are you wearing?" The correspondent thrust a microphone at her. Isabel leaned in. Her voice was velvet. "Schiaparelli. And this," she said lightly, touching the canary diamond, "is a gift. From a friend. And your name for the roster." Isabel smiled. "It's not Cromwell," she said, her voice carrying over the microphones. "It's Sterling. Isabel Sterling." She turned from them, leaving Arthur and Chloe in her wake, two statues on a burning battlefield. As she reached the top of the steps, the grand doors of the museum opened. Sebastian Vale stood in the archway, backlit like a god. He was wearing a custom Tom Ford tux, unbuttoned with no tie. He was charisma made flesh. He hadn't been on the steps. He didn't need to be. He was the host. He walked forward, ignoring the cameras, and took Isabel's hand. He didn't shake it. He lifted it to his lips and kissed it. "Isabel," he said, his voice a low baritone that the microphones just caught. "You're late. I was starting to worry." "The underworld is a long way from here, Sebastian," she replied, not missing a beat. "Well," he said, offering her his arm, "welcome back to the light." Together the new gods they turned and walked into the gala, leaving the world and one very enraged Arthur Cromwell to wonder what in God's name had just happened. The great hall of the Met had been transformed. It was no longer a hall of statues, it was a dark techno-Olympus. Black marble floors gleamed under strategically placed spotlights casting long dramatic shadows. The Temple of Dender wasn't just lit. It was alive, bathed in an electric blue light that pulsed in time with a low ambient electronic beat. The air was thick with the scent of Baccarat Rouge, 540, night-blooming jasmine, and the sound of quiet billion-dollar deal-making. Isabel's arrival with Sebastian Vale had the effect of a nuclear bomb. The whispering, which had been a polite background hum, spiked into a frantic high-frequency hiss. They had all seen the alerts from page 6 in the New York Post that afternoon. Isabel Cromwell left with nothing. Arthur Wynn's ex-wife gets the boot, not the loot. And yet here she was. "That's her," a woman whispered from behind a large floral display, her voice sharp with disbelief. "She's not supposed to be here. She's supposed to be, I don't know, in Brooklyn." "Look at the necklace," her companion hissed back. "My God, is that the Vale canary I thought it was in his private vault in Geneva? That's not a loaner. That's a deed. He gave it to her. She's with Vale. Arthur is going to have an aneurysm." "Forget Arthur," the first woman said, her eyes narrowing. She looks dangerous." The wives, as Isabel had privately called them, were circling. These were the women who had been her friends for 5 years, who had lunched with her at La Grenouille and the Modern, who had shared champagne in the Hamptons, and who had to a woman dropped her the second Arthur's affair with Chloe Preston became public. Their husbands were all on Arthur's boards or played golf with him at Shinnecock Hills. One of them, the queen bee of the hive, Patricia Abernathy, detached herself from a group and slithered over. Patricia was dressed in a safe, elegant Carolina Herrera ball gown. She was old money, and she viewed Isabel as a failed experiment. "Isabel, darling," Patricia cooed, her eyes not on Isabel's face but on the canary diamond. Her smile was a masterpiece of socialite sympathy, which is to say it was all teeth and venom. "I was so devastated to hear the news. We all were. We were just sick for you. You look surprisingly well, all things considered." The subtext was clear. "What are you doing here, you little charity case? Who let you in?" Isabel, who once would have shrunk under that gaze, now met it with a placid, almost bored expression. "Patricia," Isabel said, her voice clear and cool, taking a glass of champagne from a passing tray. "How lovely. And how is Robert?" Patricia's smile faltered. "Robert, he's fine. He's over by the bar." "Good," Isabel said, taking a small sip. "I was just wondering. I read a projection analysis on Cromwell Logistics Asia. I heard their Q3 projections were, shall we say, optimistic." Patricia went pale. Her husband Robert was the head of that specific and failing division. I really wouldn't know. I don't concern myself with—" "You should," Isabel said, her smile suddenly sharp as a diamond shard. "I find it's always best to know when a ship is taking on water, especially when you're in a first-class cabin. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe Sebastian is waiting." She left Patricia Abernathy with her mouth open, a perfect O of shock. Patricia hadn't just been dismissed. She'd been warned. The message was clear. I'm not one of you anymore. And I know all your husband's secrets. She glided through the room, an iceberg calm and beautiful on the surface, with 9/10 of her power hidden and deadly. She was by the Temple of Dender exhibit when the attack she had been expecting finally came. A hand grabbed her arm, hard, vice-like. "What is this game, Isabel?" Arthur, his face so handsome on television, was a mottled, terrifying red. He was breathing heavily, his Brioni suit jacket straining. He had bypassed Sebastian's personal security in a blind rage. Chloe Preston was hovering a few feet behind him, looking like a scared child, her silver Versace dress suddenly looking cheap. "Arthur," Isabel said, her voice dangerously quiet. She looked pointedly at his white-knuckled fingers digging into the black velvet of her sleeve. "You're making a scene. Let go of my arm." I am the scene. He hissed, his voice low and furious. He was shaking. That car, that costume, that rock around your neck. Did you have him all along? Was this your pathetic backstabbing plan while you were crying in my house? He was so used to her flinching to her tears. He needed her to cry. Her calm was enraging him. What plan? Isabel asked, her voice light, genuinely curious. She didn't pull her arm away. She simply stood unmoving, forcing him to be the aggressor. My plan: to be publicly humiliated, to be thrown out of my home, to be given a payout that wouldn't even cover your bar tab at the Carlyle. You're right, Arthur. It's all gone exactly to my plan. He was momentarily wrong-footed. Then what is this? You're with Vale, my greatest enemy. You left the courthouse and ran straight to him. You think he'll take care of you? He'll drop you in a week, Isabel. He'll use you up and throw you away just like you did, she finished for him. He flinched as if slapped. The sound of his own arrogance mirrored back at him was too much. You bitch, he spat, his face inches from hers. You signed the papers. You signed them. You have nothing. That's right, Arthur, Isabel said. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, and the scent of her Frederic Malle perfume enveloped him, a scent he had bought for her. I have nothing. She smiled, that same maddening smile from the courthouse. And you know what they say. When you have nothing to lose. She pulled her arm from his grasp, which had gone slack in his shock. Now, she said, smoothing the velvet of her sleeve, I highly recommend you get a drink. You look terrible, and I think your +1 is about to cry. Isabel turned and walked away, leaving him steaming impotent. The entire encounter had taken less than 90 seconds, but a dozen phones had captured it. She found Sebastian Vale by the main stage, where he was talking animatedly with a senator and the CEO of Google. He saw her approach, saw the storm cloud of Arthur in her wake, and a slow, appreciative smile spread across his face. Everything all right, Persephone? He murmured as she joined him, handing her a fresh glass of champagne. Perfect, she said. He's rattled. Rattled good, Vale said, his eyes glittering. The hornets are in the nest. Let's see if we can get them to swarm. He tapped a microphone on the lectern. A high-pitched electronic ping silenced the room. The ambient music faded. A spotlight found him. Good evening, everyone, Sebastian Vale's voice boomed across the hall. The chatter died instantly. Welcome to Olympus. A smattering of polite, if nervous, applause. Arthur and Chloe had found seats at a table near the front right, next to the pale-faced Abernethys. Arthur was staring at Vale with pure, unadulterated loathing. I love this museum, Vale continued, walking the stage, his Tom Ford tux a stark contrast to his roguish energy. It's full of history, full of stories. Stories of gods, of monsters, of empires that thought they would last forever, and the new blood that rose up to replace them. He smiled. Tonight we are celebrating a new future. A future of transparency, of innovation, and of disruption. He let that word hang in the air, $100, $1,000 a plate threat. My company, Vale Digital Ventures, has long been interested in that last one. Disruption. And tonight I'm not just here to show you old statues. I'm here to announce the acquisition of a new portfolio. A technology so powerful, so revolutionary, it's going to change everything. The room was silent. This was not a normal gala speech. You all know Cromwell Global Holdings, Vale said. It wasn't a gasp. It was a suck. The sound of 500 lungs inhaling at once. You never name a competitor, a rival, at an event like this. It was a breach of etiquette so profound it was almost a declaration of war. Arthur Cromwell sat up, bolt upright, his chair scraping on the marble. You know them. Vale said, his voice a surgeon's scalpel. As a reliable, if dull, part of the old guard, a logistics company. But what you don't know is that they've been sitting on a secret. Arthur's face, which had been red, was now draining of all color. A project so secret they kept it off their own books. A project they codenamed Project Chimera. The name hit the room like a physical blow. Arthur turned slowly, mechanically, his furious, confused gaze sweeping the room until it found Isabel. She was standing next to the stage, bathed in the blue light, watching him. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't angry. She was just watching. And in that moment, Arthur Cromwell understood. He had not been in court for a divorce. He had been in court for an execution. And he had just been pronounced dead. Project Chimera. Sebastian Vale continued, his voice resonating with theatrical power. He was a master showman, and this was his masterpiece. He paced the edge of the stage not as a host but as a prosecutor. The entire room was his jury. A fully autonomous, AI-driven logistics network, he explained, his tone one of mock admiration. It's predictive. It's self-healing. It's a technology that will make every other supply chain on Earth obsolete. It's a $1 trillion idea, folks. A trillion, with a T. He let that number hang in the air, a spectacular, glittering weight. In the audience, investors who had stakes in Cromwell Global shifted their eyes wide. A $1 trillion project they'd never heard of, a project so secret, Vale said, his voice dropping, that Arthur didn't just hide it from his competitors. He hid it from his own board. He hid it from his shareholders. He hid it from the SEC. He funded it with off-ledger accounts, dark money, and a shell company in the Caymans. A collective, horrified gasp. This was no longer just a rivalry. This was a criminal accusation. Every phone in the room was not just recording, they were streaming. Arthur Cromwell was on his feet. "This is slander, Vale," he roared, his face a mask of purple rage. "You're a charlatan. You have no proof, you—" "Sit down, Arthur," Vale said. It wasn't a request. It was a command, cold and flat. "The grown-ups are talking. You see," he continued, turning back to the enthralled crowd, "that's not even the most interesting part. The most interesting part is that Project Chimera was built on a lie." He looked directly at Arthur, a wolfish grin playing on his lips. "It was built on stolen land." Arthur, who had been halfway back to his seat, froze. His face, which had been red, was now a waxy, sickly white. He knew. In that microsecond, he knew. You see, to build this chimera, Arthur needed a foundational algorithm, a spark, a key, a little piece of genius he couldn't create himself. So he found one. He found it in a small, brilliant company he acquired years ago, a company called Prometheus Software. At a table in the back, Mr. Harrigan, Arthur's lead counsel, who had come to celebrate the victory, looked like he'd been shot. He was fumbling for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he dropped it on his salad plate. Arthur assumed the core patent for that algorithm was part of the corporate buyout, Vale said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. A clerical error, an oversight, a multi-billion-dollar oops. He built his entire secret empire on a foundation he didn't own. "So," Vale said, "for the past 6 months my team at Vale Digital has been in communication, not with Cromwell Global, but with the true owner of the Prometheus patent, the sole legal heir." The spotlight that had been on Vale snapped off. The hall was plunged into a momentary heart-stopping darkness. The only sound was the collective silent inhalation of 500 of the world's most powerful people. Snap, hiss. A single brilliant white spotlight hit Isabel Sterling. She was standing by the stage, her hand on the canary diamond, her Schiaparelli dress looking like gilded armor. Her face was a mask of sublime cold serenity. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't a +1. She looked every inch the goddess Persephone, queen of the underworld, risen to pass judgment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sebastian Vale's voice rang out from the darkness, a herald's cry. "Meet my new partner." The room was still as death. "The founder and CEO of the newly formed Sterling Industries." A confused murmur. Sterling Industries. The brilliant mind who not only identified Project Chimera, but who legally owns the intellectual property it is built on. The murmur turned into a low, stunned roar. The woman who, as of 3:17 p.m. today, just 4 hours ago, filed an injunction so vast it has effectively frozen Arthur Cromwell's entire Chimera division. And, Vale concluded as he stepped back into the edge of her light, my guest of honor tonight, meet Isabel Sterling. The silence that followed was shattered. It wasn't applause. It was a raw, visceral roar of shock, of awe, of the paradigm shifting in real time. Arthur Cromwell, however, didn't hear it. He was a bull blind with rage. The complex legal and financial implications were lost on him. All he saw was the ultimate personal betrayal. "You!" he screamed. His voice cracked, echoing in a way that would be viral in seconds. He pointed a shaking finger at her, his entire body vibrating. "You did this. You were a waitress. You were nothing. I gave you everything." The room, which had been loud, fell back into a profound, horrified silence. The mask was not just off, it was shattered. This was not a king, this was an animal. Isabel Sterling, however, did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She simply looked at him. Then she began to walk. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She walked, her heels clicking softly on the marble, directly toward his table. She stopped just feet from him. Sebastian had apparently given her a microphone because when she spoke her voice was calm, clear, and amplified, cutting through his ragged breathing. "I was overlooked," she said. Arthur recoiled as if she had struck him. "You and your entire team of high-priced lawyers overlooked me." She was no longer just speaking to him. She was addressing the room. "You thought I was stupid. You told your friends I couldn't balance a checkbook. You told me on our wedding night that my only job was to look pretty. So I did. I looked pretty and I smiled, while I watched you build your entire future on my foundation." She took another step. "You were so eager to get rid of me, so eager to lock me out and bring her in." She flicked a glance at Chloe, who looked like she was about to be physically ill. "You rushed that divorce. You didn't want to give me a single dime more than the prenup stipulated. And today," she said, her voice a silken surgical blade, "in court, in front of Judge Mariana Vasquez, your lawyer, Mr. Harrigan." She nodded to the back table where Harrigan looked like he was praying for a stray meteor. "He had you confirm under oath that all marital assets had been declared. You swore to the state of New York that the dissolution was final. You severed my finances from yours permanently." A single collective gasp rose from the crowd as they in that moment understood the trap. "You weren't divorcing me, Arthur," she said, her smile now a predator's grin. "You were liberating me. You signed under oath that you had no further claim on me or my assets. And my premarital asset, that Prometheus patent, its value just skyrocketed." Sebastian Vale stepped back to the lectern, a phone in his hand, a grim look on his face. "In fact," Vale said, his voice cutting in, "I have one more announcement. At 7:50 p.m. 10 minutes ago, the board of Cromwell Global Holdings, many of whom are in this room," he gestured to Robert Abernathy, who was now clutching his chest. "Isn't that right, Robert?" They held an emergency virtual vote. Given the catastrophic legal exposure, the impending SEC investigation for defrauding shareholders by hiding a multi-billion-dollar asset, and the fact that your primary R&D project is now the legal property of a competitor, they have voted unanimously to remove you as CEO, effective immediately. It was done. The execution was complete. Arthur Cromwell, a titan of industry, a new god in his own right, stumbled. He wasn't a god. He was just a man who had lost everything in 4 hours. "I'll destroy you," he choked out, his voice a ragged whisper. "I'll see you in court for the rest of your life. No, Arthur, you won't," Isabel said, and her voice was almost kind, which was the most terrifying part. "You're broke, or you will be." She looked at Chloe, whose face was a ruin of running mascara. "That lovely offshore account you'd been funneling money to Faithon Investments, a little nod to mythology. The son of the sun god who crashed his father's chariot? I picked the name myself. Isabel had controlled the shell company all along. All that money you've been sending to your girlfriend? Isabel continued. It's all been sitting in a trust managed by Sterling Industries. It will be returned, of course, to the Cromwell Global shareholders you stole it from. Chloe Preston let out a small strangled sound, a dying animal. The money was gone. The man was gone. She stood up, knocking her chair over, and fled the ballroom, a streak of ruined Versace and broken dreams. A footnote. Isabel looked back at the man who had been her husband. He was hollow, a shell, a hollow man in a hollow suit. You know Arthur, she said softly, leaning in for one final devastating word. You were right about one thing all those years ago. The prenup was ironclad. She let the silence hang a suspended blade. It protected me from you. The room was so quiet you could have heard a diamond drop. The silence that followed Isabel's final devastating line was not just a lack of noise. It was a physical weight. It was the sound of an entire power structure, an entire social hierarchy collapsing in on itself. Arthur Cromwell stood alone in the center of the room, a king in a play who had just realized all the other actors had left the stage. He was a vacuum, a hollow man. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The rage had burned through him, leaving nothing but ash. He was no longer a threat. He was a relic. He was the old statue. She was the new god. He turned not with a bang, but with a slow, agonizing whimper. As he pivoted toward the grand exit, the spell broke. The first sound was the whir-click of a dozen cameras from the press pen which had just been unroped by Gala security. The second was the sudden savage eruption of flashes, a new supernova, this one illuminating his walk of shame. Mr. Cromwell. Arthur, is it true? Are you stepping down? What is Project Chimera? The questions came like bullets, but he didn't seem to hear them. He walked past the table where Robert and Patricia Abernathy sat. Patricia, who had tried to patronize Isabel an hour earlier, now looked at Arthur with something beyond pity, contempt. The contempt of the pack for a wounded and now useless leader. He stumbled on the top step, a small, pathetic lurch, before disappearing into the lobby, a fallen emperor swallowed by the very world he had sought to rule. The room as one turned back to Isabel. The air crackled thick with awe-fear, and a new frantic recalculation. Every single person in that hall, the investors, the bankers, the socialites, the wives, was recalibrating their entire universe around this new fixed point. Isabel Sterling was not a +1. She was not a trophy. She was, as of this moment, the single most powerful woman in the room. And then Sebastian Vale, the showman, gave his final command. He signaled to the orchestra hidden on a balcony. The silence was broken not by chatter, but by the sweet, sweeping swell of a violin. A waltz. Strauss. It was classic, it was traditional, and in this context, it was an act of supreme audacious power. Sebastian Vale walked down from the lectern. He crossed the vast marble floor, his footsteps the only sound besides the music. He ignored the hundreds of phone cameras trained on him. He had eyes only for Isabel. He stopped in front of her. He didn't say a word. He just smiled, a look of profound, unadulterated admiration in his eyes. Then, with the entire New York oligarchy as his witness, Sebastian Vale offered a slight formal bow. Ms. Sterling, he said, his voice low but carrying in the rapt quiet. He held out his hand. I believe you promised me a dance. Isabel looked at his outstretched hand. She took a single deep breath. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, replaced by a feeling she hadn't recognized in years' clarity. The heavy Graf diamond, which had felt like a costume, now felt like a coronation medal. The Schiaparelli dress was not armor. It was her skin. She was no longer the porcelain prisoner. She was no longer the unseen spy. She was, for the first time in her adult life, completely, terrifyingly, and wonderfully free. She placed her hand in his. I believe I did, Mr. Vale. He led her to the center of the floor, the space Arthur's ghost had just vacated. As he put his hand on the small of her back on the gold-embroidered rib cage of her dress, the music swelled. He spun her into the waltz. They moved as one, a vortex of black velvet and white diamonds. The crowd watched mesmerized. This was not a dance. This was a claiming of territory. This was the sealing of an alliance that had just toppled an empire. As they spun, Sebastian leaned in, his lips close to her ear. That, he whispered, his voice a mix of humor and pure astonishment, was the most hostile, elegant, and utterly catastrophic corporate demolition I have ever witnessed. The SEC is going to have a field day. The board, you turned them in 10 minutes. Isabel looked over his shoulder, her gaze sweeping the room of stunned faces. They were businessmen, Sebastian. She whispered back, a hint of steel in her voice. I just showed them the cost-benefit analysis. Arthur had become a liability. He laughed, a low, genuine sound. I'm half in love with you and half terrified of you. Good, Isabel replied as he spun her in a final grand flourish. Keep 'em guessing. It's my new motto. They stopped, the music fading into a respectful hush. The flashes returned, but they were no longer hostile. They were celebratory. The New York Times reporter already had his headline. The Vogue correspondent was already dictating the story of the dress, the diamonds, and the divorce that would redefine power in New York. Isabel Sterling had walked into court that morning as a victim. She was waltzing out of the gala as a billionaire, a CEO, and the undisputed new queen of a city that had tried to destroy her. She hadn't just gotten revenge. She had achieved a resurrection, and as she stood in the center of the floor, Sebastian Vale's hand still in hers, Isabel threw her head back, and for the first time her smile wasn't a secret or a weapon or a mask. It was just happy. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but for Isabel Sterling, it was served hot under the blinding lights of the Met Gala in front of everyone who had ever written her off. Arthur Cromwell lost his company, his reputation, and his fortune, all because he underestimated the woman he thought he owned. The story of Isabel Sterling proves one thing: never ever mistake a woman's silence for surrender. Sometimes she's not just waiting, she's reloading. What did you think of Isabel's ultimate checkmate? Was it justice, or was it the most ruthless revenge plot of all time? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of epic triumphs and in-depth drama, make sure to like this video. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own power. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss the stories we have coming up next.